What are you currently reading?
I've been reading books on Russia because I was recently in Russia. I read a book by a historian named Orlando Feigs called History of Russia. And I've been reading Masha Gessen, The Future is the Past, which is a very powerful evocation of the way President Putin seemed to be taking Russia briefly towards some different future. And in fact, the future resembles the past.
What's your process for writing a book?
I am not somebody who lays out the entire plan for the book chapter by chapter before I embark. I have an idea in my head of what I want to say and how I want to say it. Often I will try to tell broader stories through people. I'm most interested in human psychology and how who we are reflects the historical forces that have formed the societies in which we live. And then I set out, I start writing, and it's hell. Writing a book is hell, it's difficult. You just have to sit there. And it can be pretty bleak at times. There's not a lot coming forth. But I would say that when you write a book, it's like climbing, and there are a series of ridges, and sometimes you see a ridge and you think you'll get there and you'll see the way home. And it turns out to be a false hope. But eventually you do, eventually you do. You reach a point where, and you go over the cusp and you can see how you can tie the bow and bring the book together and write the last chapters. So that's how I write a book.
Tell us about the place that you sit when you write or you do your editing.
There's not one fixed place. The prerequisites for me are above all silence. I need silence, or as close to silence as I can get. I need a space that is big enough so that I can leave all my papers out. The essential thing is that when you stop writing, which normally in my case would be, after about 3 p.m, my mind is pretty useless for creative. The best time is the first 4 hours from about 9 a.m. You can do revisions in the afternoon, or I can, but actual creative writing is much more difficult. But the essential thing is that when you pick up the next morning, you can pick up physically and mentally in the place you left off. And everything is still where it was. And for me, book writing is a very particular part of my mind that is distinct from writing journalism, let's say. And so I'm not somebody who can get up at 5 a.m. and write a book between 5 and 8 a.m. and then go to work and write a piece in the New York Times. I need to take a stretch of time where I can immerse myself completely in the book project.
What's the most enjoyable part of living in Paris?
Well, Paris is a city of endless delights, and it's a city that, however long you've lived there, can ambush you at any moment and stop you in your steps just to contemplate, say, the sun setting over the hills of Saint-Cloud in the west of Paris as you stand on the Pont du Carrousel, let's say, that leads from the Louvre. And well, of course, you eat extremely well, you drink extremely well, you have an infinite variety of cultural attractions of every possible nature. But I would say, above all, you're always discovering it. There's always some little street or alley or quartier district area that you didn't know. So it's a city of endless secrets.
How many countries have you lived in, and what's been the best foreign bureau to be assigned to?
I don't know how many foreign countries I've lived in, but I've lived in a lot of foreign countries. To begin with, in Europe, I've lived in England, Belgium, Germany, France, Italy. I probably lived in, I don't know, a dozen countries. I went to Rome as a young man in my late 20s, I guess I was 28 or something. And I lived in Rome, and covering Italy, it was blissful. And it's fascinating, Italy, because you have towns in the north. The north of Italy is the most prosperous part of Europe, and it's very efficient and it works very well. And then you go down to Naples or Palermo, and it's an entirely different story. So the variety of the coverage was fascinating. But playing tennis on clay courts all the year round in the sunshine is not bad. And just the beauty of Rome. And I was young, and I was my own bureau. I could write what I wanted. It was fabulous.
You've traveled extensively and often on short notice. What's your method for packing for an international trip?
Well, of course, when the phone goes in the middle of the night, as it did, let's say for me, the Wall Street Journal had asked me to cover Italy, and about 3 weeks after I started working, the phone went and they wanted me to go to Beirut and cover the war there after the Marines got blown up there in the early 1980s. When you're a young man, or a young woman, I think, and the phone goes in the middle of the night like that, you're just up for it, it's there's no question. And when you have to leave very fast, you just, throw things in a bag. I've packed so many times that I don't care to think about it. I don't really have a technique. Sometimes I just decide that I'm not gonna put any luggage in the hold. So then I just, pack in a very limited way. More often, I end up probably bringing more than I need, but I don't. I mean, people have all kinds of method, rolling everything up, and I'm a little bit more haphazard than that.
What are some characteristics of a really great city?
Well, I think a world-class city like New York has an enormous variety of elements to it. You have the financial world, you have the scientific world, you have the publishing world, you have the movie world, you have the journalistic world. And so it's many communities living together, understanding each other. I think a great city needs to work, needs to function on the level of, transport and so on. And I think a great city is a sort of microcosm of life. It just brings people of every background and together in a place which those who are in it understand. I mean, in New York, for example, on the subway at the end of the day, there's definitely a look between New Yorkers. You just look at one another, and you've gotten through it, you've done it. It's a tough place, but it's a great place. It's endlessly stimulating, and there's just that look of, I would say, shared exhaustion and understanding. And I think most great cities have a kind of complicity that comes from everybody's unique understanding of it.
What's your favorite song or album by the Grateful Dead?
American Beauty.
You're well studied on global cultures, history, politics, and conflict. But what's one subject where you have on blinders? That is to say, either you can't or don't have an interest in keeping up with information about it.
I don't know. I mean, most subjects interest me to some degree, but I'm a person of successive obsessions. There are countries I become obsessed by. I was obsessed by Argentina in the 1980s. I was obsessed by Iran in the early 2000s. I was obsessed by Italy for a while. I'm semi-obsessed by Russia right now. A real, I don't know, in terms of international affairs?
Anything.
Well, I'm close to surfeiting on identity politics. I tend to read one paragraph, and I'm just, I just think the navel-gazing of people and the endless self-obsession of people these days, I'm totally cool with everybody being whatever they want to be, whatever identity they choose, but I just don't really want to read about it every day.
How do you deal with public criticism of your opinions?
I take it and I move on.
What's a nostalgic food item from your childhood, perhaps maybe in South Africa, that you are drawn to?
My mother's boiled tongue sitting in the sitting on a shelf somewhere in the pantry with English Coleman's mustard.
Where were you, and maybe what did it feel like to learn you had won a Pulitzer for your work?
I was in France. I was at a friend's place about 50 miles from France, his country house. And the Pulitzers were announced on a Monday, and I'd been told that this submission of which I was part, I had written this piece, The Making of Vladimir Putin, that was one of the 7 pieces in the submission. And I'd been told that we were finalists. And I'd been told that another finalist was the Wall Street Journal. And I thought, given that Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal correspondent, has been detained now in Russia without any justifiable reason for more than 4 months, I thought the judges would probably have an inclination to give the prize to the journal. But normally it leaks out on a Saturday, or sort of Saturday and then Sunday, and then around 4:30 on Sunday afternoon, I got a note from the executive editor, Joe Cohen, asking me to attend a meeting that he was calling at 6 o'clock. I didn't think he would call a meeting to tell us we had not won the Pulitzer Prize. And indeed, that's what he told me and the other journalists on the call, that we had indeed won a Pulitzer Prize. Well, it felt great. It felt like something I no longer expected. When I covered the war in Bosnia, there'd been a lot of talk about it. The Pulitzer is a lottery. It's a lottery. You never really know. I mean, you just don't know. And once you have a Pulitzer, I guess I feel, well, now I can hang up my typewriter, and go and cultivate my garden, as Voltaire put it, cultiver son jardin. But yeah, it's a great feeling. It feels like recognition for decades and decades of work, but there are lots of people who do the same amount of work and just as good, and it never happens to them. So I'm grateful.
After writing a lot about difficulties in world affairs, what do you do to decompress?
Well, above all, I like to cook. I like cooking, and I do quite a lot of that. And I like to hike when I can, and yeah, when I can sort of separate my mind from all I'm doing, I enjoy reading novels, and I'm actually in the midst of trying to write a novel that I wrote 60,000 words of during COVID and then sort of got distracted from, but I'd like to go back to it.
What's the hardest moment you've had as a journalist?
I think there have been so many. I mean, the desperation of people trapped in Sarajevo during the war in Bosnia, mothers with pregnant women with small kids, and I had a press pass with great difficulty I could get in and out. I was only supposed to use it for myself or another journalist, but there are moments when your journalism is less important than your humanity. You know, I would help where I could. Seeing the massive uprising in Tehran in 2009 with 2 million people in the street, and these cries going up every night, Magba, dictator, you know, death to the dictator, and being in a country that was absolutely on a razor's edge, you know, it could have gone either way. 2 million people, you know, 2 million people march on the palace. What are you going to do? Kill 2 million people? And it could have gone either way. And seeing that then ruthlessly and brutally crushed in Tehran, and this joyous atmosphere before the election, which then turned out to be a complete fraud. You know, Ahmadinejad was pronounced the victor within a couple of hours, and it was. And then the Iranian forces were out in the street just beating people up, and that took a heavy toll on me.
If you weren't a journalist, what do you think you'd be doing?
I would like to think I would have a jewelry store.
All right, so this is the this or that section.
How many this or that are there?
7. Full English or fish and chips?
Full English.
Hot dog or hamburger?
Hamburger.
Baguette or, pardon my French, croissants en beurre?
Baguette.
New York or Paris?
New York.
Editing or reporting?
Reporting.
Oxford comma or non-serial comma?
Non-serial comma.
Global or local?
Global.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I
That's
don't
an,
add anything for the camera about the jewelry store, but why a jewelry store? You just like jewelry?
yeah, I like jewelry. I like the feel of precious stones in my
But you
hand.
don't wear rings or?
No, we're cufflinks.
Okay.
There you go.